Howdy everybody. What we're going to be going over today is the Mamiya 645 system that I've been shooting on for close to 2 years. Is this 3-lens system of a 45mm, 80mm, and a 105 to 210mm. So I get a pretty good coverage of those zones, and then I also have some extra filters and additions to kind of get the most out of those 3 lenses that are adapted through this focal reducer. The brand is Kipon, and it's Mamiya 645 format, and then it shrinks the image circle down to the size of the Sony A7R, which is what I'm filming this with right now. Say hello, you know? This is the powerhouse of the whole format. The real Mamiya format to full frame is a crop factor of about 0.62. So if you have a 100mm lens on 645, it would be a 62mm lens on full frame. It would be the equivalent of a 62mm. The actual adapter that I use only covers about a 0.7 crop factor. What is a focal reducer? Some of you might be asking. Focal reducer reduces the size of an image circle as well as the focal length and relative aperture of that first given lens. So a 100mm f4 on Mamiya would be about the same as a 70mm f2.8 on 35, but that's only if you use a focal reducer. There are also these adapters which they don't have any glass in them. You can see this one has glass. If they don't actually have a focal reducer in them, then you end up with a completely different effect. The reason why this is so expensive is because everything but the resolution of medium format is completely transferred over to a 35mm format. So this is an insanely powerful little lens that makes the whole world go round. Alright, so without further ado, I'm going to get into the 3 lenses that I use for this system. The focal length is going to go lowest to highest, so we're going to start with the 45mm f2.8. That is not the 45mm. It's a really beautiful lens. You'll notice that it's quite a bit bigger than a 35mm lens. Like, this is a 24mm, so you can see there's a considerable size difference for generally a similar lens. This is 2.8, this is 2.8, but you can see that one is bigger than the other because this one is designed to create a bigger image circle overall. So the focal length as well as the opening for light to get in is going to be bigger. On their original formats, the light that is actually hitting the surface would be the same amount of light. But with a focal reducer, the whole point is that you're reducing the circle to make the concentration of light higher once you stop it down to full frame, which is why you gain an extra stop of light if you're using medium format with a focal reducer on a full frame camera. So yes, this is a 2.8, which is roughly equal to a f2 lens, which is reasonably fast, especially for full frame. The sheer amount of glass that you have to have in the front element when you're using medium format would make something like an f1.4 or an f1.2 pretty beefy. So speaking of speed, this is one of the lenses that I use the most out of the 3. This is the 80mm f1.9, which is just about the fastest lens you can get on this format. So the f1.9 is equivalent to about an f1.3, and 80mm is about 55mm on full frame. So what we're dealing with here is a 55mm f1.3 functionally. Great separation and sharpness at basically almost all the way down to f1.9. I mean, I typically use it at 2.8 or 4, but 1.9 definitely has its own dreamlike look that I think is just really mesmerizing. Yeah, I'm not sure how usable that audio is actually going to be now that I think about it, because I had 2 heaters on in this room. So yeah, we'll see about that. On to the last lens here. This is the 105 to 210, and it's f3.5 consistently throughout that focal range. So as you can see, it's a pretty big lens, especially if you're gonna like fully extend it. Yeah, this is something that you're gonna be using if you've got a strong wrist Otherwise, I would not recommend it. So this lens equivalent on full frame is about a 75 to 150 millimeter. The f4.5 is actually kind of fast for the zoom range. It works well enough, especially if you stop down to 8. You're still able to separate the foreground from the background and get some really crisp images. I use all these lenses mostly in direct sunlight because you can just stop them down and get so much richness out of just everything in the frame. And you can see on this one, there's actually a bit of damage here. I don't know if you can see that on the barrel. There's like a dent. And then on the front focus ring, unfortunately, there's a bit of a dent in the ring. I didn't buy it like that. I actually did that just out of carelessness. And luckily, I hadn't bought any filters that needed to go on there, but it's too bad. All right, now we got some extra accessories that I also use almost every time I use this camera system, just for some extra range. It's a 0.7 times wide angle adapter, so it would turn a 100 millimeter into a 70 millimeter. Some of you might be asking what the difference between this and a focal reducer is. This goes in front of the lens, so it just changes the angle of light that gets into the lens, where it's not widening or affecting the aperture in any way. If anything, you might actually lose a little bit of light around the edges. You'll get some vignetting if you use a wide angle adapter this strong, but you can see the size of it and the design of it. I was really lucky to come across this one. It has such little distortion, it's incredible. So if I attach this to my 45 millimeter, I'd end up with a 31 millimeter before going through the focal reducer. When it goes through the focal reducer, that's another 0.7 times reduction in focal length. So this would be roughly equivalent to, I think, a 21 millimeter lens. 0.7 times 3, or well, it'll just be half of 45. I'm gonna do the math on that one to make sure it checks out. 31 divided by, 37 times 0.7. This is the equivalent of a 21 millimeter lens on full frame. So it's quite wide. The range of view is actually measured from the tip of the element. So it has about 100 degrees of field of view diagonally. So this can get a little bit wider if that 45 millimeter isn't doing it. And then the other attachment I have is this 2 times teleconverter made by some third-party company, Kenko, apparently. The thing is with these, though, is that you actually cut the amount of light that you have in half. So if it's a 2 times teleconverter, your f4 lens becomes an f5.6, or your f8 becomes an f11. And there's really no way around that. It's just par for the course, because what it's going to do is turn a 100 millimeter lens into a 200 millimeter lens. But this would just attach. I mostly use it again with the longest lens in the group. We were talking about the size of this lens earlier. Now if I'm using the 210, the 2 times, and the focal reducer, and then you got a camera this way. So I mean, this is what we're talking about when we say massive lenses. With these 2 extra accessories, it's more like a 5 lens system, because I can use my 30 millimeter, 45, 80, 100 to 210, and then a 210 to 420. That's a pretty wide range. If you're working from 30 millimeters to 420, that's over 10 times magnification. And I plan on doing a follow-up video to this. I was thinking about doing actually a whole series about focal reducers and reducing from larger formats to 35, because I'm working on my own project to reduce 4x5 large format camera to this size of this sensor. So to go over some of the other advantages of this Mamiya system, the amount of distortion you get with wide angle lenses is practically nothing. On a micro four thirds system, you're going to notice a lot more distortion and noticeable lines to infinity at the center of the image. It's the camera has to bend more light to a smaller area. Bending light will always cause a little bit of distortion. And so the bigger area that you're capturing in relation to what you're trying to capture in front of the camera, the less distortion you're going to have. And also, having more glass overall to capture more light that it can be reduced is a good thing in general. So if you're using a lens with a 90-degree field of view on micro four thirds, you're going to notice a ton of distortion. Whereas if you're using a lens with the same angle of view on Mamiya 645 would look like very little distortion. The 645 system has the distortion rate of a 50mm lens while being able to take in a greater amount of the picture. There's all these races in camera history about sensor size and about low light capabilities is the most recent one. There's the resolution races, and I think what's going to happen next is the format races, because less distortion in your video generally is going to be something that people want, and especially if you can have this sharpness and the portraiture kind of aspect of lenses at extreme wide angles really looks comforting, almost like a painting. It's really something special, and I'm hoping with this footage that I'm going to also This is going to be the first video on this whole journey of video making. I used to do it quite a lot, and here we are again. We're going to see how it goes. I'm primarily interested in lenses this time, so I'm going to be reviewing this other set of Nikons I have. I wanted to do a whole video on lens circle reduction and building your own lenses. I want to show you a couple of home-built ones that I've made, and the really unique images that you can get from making your own simple lens systems. Oh yeah, and other than that, I'm working on my own feature film now. I'm about halfway through production, and I also wanted to do vlog. Sounds cheesy, but I wanted to make some kind of video to go along with that, and also to help with the publicity of the film, because I've got zero plans as of now. Yeah, so we're gonna see how this goes. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of anything, write it in the comment section below, and I will do that, because as you can see from my list of ideas, I've got about 5. So have a good one, everybody.